Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming for this series of the Heritage Lecture. This was initiated as part of the centenary celebration of the town campus. This year, we are having the 125th year of CMC, and we thought it would be good to continue this. The focus was to start with the histories of the older departments in this campus, and we'll see how it goes, and we may spread it to the others. So today, in this new year, I'd like to welcome the Department of Medicine to start off. And for that, I'd like to request Dr. Samuel Hanstedt to come forward and lead.
Good morning, friends. It's wonderful to see so many of you gathered here. On behalf of the Department of Medicine, I want to welcome all of you, those who are in person here. I can see some of our very senior alumni who have taken effort to travel all the way to be with us. And I really want to thank Dr. Alka, Dr. Lily John, who are here. I want to also welcome all of them who have connected online. And I'm told the families of Dr. Kamla Bentlingam, Dr. P. Koshi, Dr. A.M. Cherian, and Dr. T.S. Koshi, Dr. Polymer's families have also joined online. And I'm sure many of our alumni, friends, well-wishers have joined from different parts of the country and the world. And I want to extend a very warm welcome to all of you for this heritage lecture. The lecture series is a part of celebration marking 125 years of CMC and 100 years of the Vellore Town Campus, as Dr. AB mentioned. Today we embark on a journey through time to reflect on and honor the origin of the Department of Medicine. It's a tribute to the pioneers whose vision and dedication have shaped the department into what it is today. Our heritage lecture will be delivered by Dr. Anand, Zachariah, and it is my privilege to introduce the moderator of the event, Dr. Dilip Mathai. Dr. Dilip Mathai is a distinguished figure within the CMC community. It is both an honor and a challenge to encapsulate the accomplishment of someone so multifaceted, but I will do my best. Dr. Mathai belongs to MBBS batch of 1969. He served the Department of Medicine with distinction for 35 years from 1981 to 2012. He was the 10th head of department of the medicine, mentored by none other than Dr. Benjamin Polymuth. An astute clinician, never missing a crucial history of clinical science. A passionate teacher, students wonder how does this little brain hold so much. An excellent communicator, his OPD room could accommodate the entire village while he communicated to the patient. An ardent traveler, an exceptional host in a beach dress with a cowboy hat, barbecuing chicken and organizing innovative games for the students. A lifelong learner, pursued his PhD before retirement. A mentor at heart, mentoring Dr. O.C. Abraham, Dr. Anand Zachariah, Dr. Priscilla Rupali, and Dr. George Verghese. A visionary leader, Dr. Mathai laid the foundation of clinical infectious disease within Medicine 1, which includes the IDTRC, the government ART model, the prestigious Dr. Benjamin Polymuth oration. He also spearheaded the development of acute medicine care within Medicine 4. So in the words of Dr. O.C. Abraham, Dr. Dilip Mathai had a clear vision for the growth of the Department of Medicine. He built a team, nurtured and guided us, identified opportunities for us, and ensured our professional growth. He was a selfless leader, committed not to making replicas of himself, but to empowering those around him. Dr. Dilip Mathai truly embodies the spirit of leadership, mentorship, and excellence. And at this time, I give over this time. And as a moderator, the time and charge of this heritage lecture, Dr. Dilip Mathai.
Good morning. I really didn't know what my role as moderator would be, but I assume that since the Department of Medicine has been there for, let's say, 3/4 of a century, and I have been associated with it for half a century, and as I navigate this first quarter of this century, I think I am an authentic heritage figure because of my age to be on stage. So at the onset, let me just welcome once again all my senior teachers. Well, you were what brought us together. It was my I can't really name everybody in the audience, nor how many of them, the several senior distinguished alumni, esteemed colleagues, and students who are participating. I really welcome all of you to this session. I am really grateful that all of these seniors and visionary leaders have provided us the transformative capabilities of having developed this Department of Medicine. Now, I thought that as a moderator that I would have to provide, let's say, a small lecture on is our glass half full or half empty. So I had prepared a 6-page summary, but I am to understand that we have only 45 minutes, and 44 and a half minutes will be for Dr. Anand Zachariah to deliver this session, and half a minute for us to interact. Having said this, let me just introduce Dr. Anand Zachariah. When I was in men's hostel, his father, Dr. P. Zachariah, was my hostel warden. If it were not for the seniors who pulled him out of the men's hostel pond while he was drowning, he would not be alive here today to deliver this heritage lecture. And I would not have had the good fortune of being his his MD thesis guide, and also a part of my esteemed colleague in the Department of Medicine for over 3.5 decades. So I invite Dr. Anand to present his chronicled history on conserving the core of clinical medicine while specializing. Welcome, Dr. Anand, to the stage.
To my students, colleagues, my teachers, families of former faculty who have joined this lecture, good morning. Can you recognize the wards, the medicine wards in this photograph? So on the top left is the C ward and the B ward. The date of this photograph is not clear. In this lecture, Conserving the Core of Clinical Medicine While Specializing, I will be discussing 75 years of the history of the Department of Medicine. The year that of 1948 is the beginning of postgraduate training, and when Dr. Kutumbaya joined the Department of Medicine. The Department of Medicine is like a banyan tree that has a broad trunk harboring core values and traditions of clinical medicine built on the dedicated lifetime service of clinical care and teaching by pioneers who went before us. The banyan tree stretches its arms widely, allowing new ideas to take root from their own trees with new specializations that stand independently. The arbor of the tree gives us security and strength and vision to face the present and think into the future. She is mother to us all. In the last 75 years, the Department of Medicine has moved from 2 units to 5, from 1 postgraduate student to 16 per year, graduated 464 MD physicians, had 163 permanent faculty, established 10 medical specialties, and several new disciplines. Who are the people behind this, and what did they do? In black are the specialties that have branched out of medicine: cardiology, nephrology, gastroenterology, hematology, endocrinology, critical care, medical oncology, rheumatology, geriatrics, and infectious diseases. And on top in red are disciplines that medicine helped to foster, including clinical epidemiology, medical education, family medicine, primary and secondary care medicine. This is a list of the heads of Department of Medicine, and in this lecture I will be focusing on those above the line blue, who are faculty who have left Christian Medical College, Vellore. This talk is based on the analysis of written interviews with 6 former faculty of the Department of Medicine and 7 faculty who have headed specializations that have branched off from the Department of Medicine. I will be focusing on 3 themes. Who are the pioneers in the Department of Medicine? How did they develop the Department of Medicine? What is the core culture and attributes of clinical medicine that they have left behind for us in CMC? And how did they facilitate the process of specialization? I will be discussing the 60-year period between 1950 and 2010, dividing this period into 3 20-year periods. Phase 1 is the period after independence, when our college had just become a degree college. Phase 2, between 1970 and 1990, was the period just during the strike and just after the strike, where the college was faced with a lot of financial hardship and several technology decisions had to be made. Phase 3, between 1990 and 2010, is the period post-liberalization, where there was an expansion of private hospitals and medical colleges in our country. Travel became easy, and many patients came from the eastern part of the country. In addition, in this list, you will see 2 faculty, Dr. George John and Dr. A.M.S. Sheshadri, who were not heads of departments, but stayed on for a long time in the Department of Medicine before branching out, and even after that, contributed to the Department of Medicine. This first phase of 1950 to 1970 had 3 main figures: Dr. Kutumbaya in Unit 1, Dr. Kamala Vaithalingam in Unit 2, and Dr. P. Koshi in Unit 3, and they send the roots of the Department of Medicine. Dr. P. Kutumbaya, after retiring from the army, completed his career in the Andhra Medical College in Vizag, and then became the principal of the Stanley Medical College. By the time he came to Vellore, when he retired from Stanley, he was known to be an illustrious diagnostician and teacher. He headed the department for about 10 years, was the principal of CMC and also acting director. Apart from his wide-ranging clinical interests, he was a historian of medicine, writing 2 textbooks on the history of ancient medicine in India, and he was also headed the Society for the History of Medicine in India. His presence here enhanced CMC's professional image and interactions with the university. There are 2 stories which I want to tell you about Dr. Kutumbaya. One was told by Dr. Martin, and Dr. Martin was the house surgeon, and Dr. Kutumbaya was taking a clinic, and he came to the ward and he pointed to one patient and said, "Dr. Martin, post this particular patient." So Dr. Martin asked him, "Sir, but how do you know what is wrong with this patient?" He said, "Martin, comes down." Martin is tall and Kutumbaya was a short man. He said, "Look at the carotid pulse. What do you see?" So this person actually had a bounding carotid pulse. He said, "This is a sign of aortic regurgitation." And that was what the patient had. And Dr. Martin said, these kind of incidents encouraged him to do clinical medicine. The other story is of Dr. Kutumbaya walking along the Idaskada road and seeing a beggar who was dying. He took the beggar in his hand, brought him to his ward, and cared for him till he died. This is Dr. Kutumbaya on a bedside teaching. The person on the right is a medical student, and on the further right, the 3 women are postgraduates. We can see the Spartan ward, but we can see the similarities of a modern day round in our wards as well. On the left side is the first MD degree certificate of Dr. Kutumbaya student, that is Dr. Mary Thomas. Now, Dr. Mary Carney, in whose name a prize has been awarded in the last year, this date of the certificate is 1953, and she joined the course in 1950 and passed in the first attempt. On the right side is the testimonial of Dr. Kutumbaya for Dr. Mary Thomas. And in this testimonial, Dr. Kutumbaya writes about how she helped him in the studies of infantile cirrhosis, which was common in the North Akot district, and in studies of congenital heart disease and aortic aneurysm, making a good case for her to secure further training in a foreign country. Dr. Kamala Vaithalingam had a very different background. She was in the second batch of Dr. Scudder's LMP students. She joined in the year 1919. She worked in CMC, did a shortened MBBS in 1937 in Madras, and then went on to do MD in General Medicine in Madras Medical College in 1945, rejoining the Department of Medicine in 1949. She developed cardiology within medicine with the support of Dr. Reeve Betts, who was the first thoracic surgeon in CMC. She had interests in chest diseases, and then went on to train with Dr. Helen Tausig, who was a famous pediatric cardiologist, and then came back to start the department, cardiology within medicine department, branching off into an independent unit in 1956. She did the first coronary angiography in India, and she was encouraged by Dr. Scudder, who was her mentor. Dr. Kamala was known to be a strict disciplinarian. She did not allow girls to have their hair down. There's a story of her demonstrating sternal bone marrow aspiration to medical students. I want to quote from her autobiography. From my small beginning as a medical woman with 4 years of training, I was given an opportunity and facilities to undertake postgraduate studies and to specialize in subjects like medicine, chest diseases, and cardiology. I think I would have had a great deal of difficulty if I had not had the encouragement of a person like Dr. Scudder, and without the facilities that are provided in Vellore. A woman doctor would not have had these opportunities in any other medical institutions, as medical men in those days were opposed to women becoming specialists other than obstetrics and gynecology. This is a picture of Dr. Kamala with the first 2 DM students, that is Dr. George Cherry on the left and Dr. I.P. Sukumar on the right. And they became her colleagues, and this is Dr. Kamala at the bedside examining a patient. Dr. P. Koshi also did his LMP and then MD in medicine before joining the medicine unit 2 and then to 3. He was known to be a man of few words, kind and courteous to his staff and patients, with good clinical acumen and skills of prognostication. He was known for his hard work and commitment to the Department of Medicine and his patients. He headed for more than 10 years and developed nephrology within the Department of Medicine. The story of how he started dialysis is well known, and there are many accounts. So one account is that there was a businessman from Coimbatore who had kidney failure, and he came to CMC and there was no dialysis machine. This businessman bought the dialysis machine, gifted it to CMC, and sent Dr. P. Koshi for training to Seattle. Dr. P. Koshi came back and did the first hemodialysis in India in the Department of Medicine. Sent Dr. K.V. Johnny for training in nephrology. And he would perform hemodialysis in the evening and nights after the commitments to general medicine patients was over, sometimes staying on and sleeping on a stretcher into the night. Dr. P. Koshi realized that if nephrology was to develop, it would have to have an independent existence. And therefore, when Dr. K.V. Johnny came back, nephrology separated out when Dr. P. Koshi retired. This is a picture of the first dialysis machine, the Colf twin coil dialysis machine on the left. And on the right side is a picture of the early dialysis unit in the nephrology department. This is a letter by Dr. Pikoshi to the postgraduates and faculty outlining the postgraduate training program. And there are 80 lectures. There is clinical meeting on Friday afternoon and journal club on Thursday evening. And this was at a time when there were only 1 or 2 postgraduates per year. And we can see how the foundations of our postgraduate training were laid out at that time. Moving on to the second phase of the period that I'm referring to, and we have 5 professors in this time who I will be speaking about. Dr. T.S. Koshi was a perfect gentleman, gracious and benevolent, quiet, spoke little, wrote little in his chart, but had a sixth sense as a clinician and could arrive at a brilliant diagnosis with least fuss. He was known to be very supportive to his junior colleagues, and it is mentioned that he gave a lot of opportunity and encouraged and would stand with people in their times of difficulty. Dr. Lily John speaks about how he understood that she had 2 small children and also encouraged her to go in. She was an tall figure in endocrinology, and he helped her secure training in diabetes in Australia, and also encouraged Dr. Sheshadri to do endocrinology. Dr. Pulimud has been referred to at the beginning, was a consummate clinician and bedside teacher, thorough physical examination, clinical diagnosis, taught the art of clinical reasoning, made sure that every patient got good care and holistic care. He took off a year of sabbatical to visit his alumni in mission hospitals and was head for about 10 years. He encouraged the growth of gastroenterology, identified Dr. Marmon to do hematology, Dr. Dilip to do infectious disease, and was also principal and director. He used to do regular UG and PG clinics even when he was principal and director. He emphasized the importance of the socioeconomic history and knowing the background of the patient. He spent the longest hours in the OPD and the ward, and often would go late at night to see a sick patient. His grand round started at 8:30 in the morning and finished after 8:30 p.m. in the evening. He used to admit patients who needed less care in the YWCA annex, and he had a full examination tray in the YWCA annex. He was gentle, soft-spoken, with a benign smile and a simple lifestyle, white and white and black MCR chappals. Once a grateful patient brought a sack of mangoes to his house. The next day morning, Dr. Pulimud went to the PRO office and gave an amount of money equivalent to the mangoes to the PTP scheme. Patients used to come from all over the country to see Dr. Pulimud for complex problems. One patient from another country, he diagnosed a prostatic abscess based on a rectal examination. This is Dr. Pulimud with the Medicine 1 team in B ward, and Dr. Dilip at the time of his farewell on the right. This is a drawing of one of his students indicating Dr. Pulimud's multifaceted personality, from a Santosh Trophy goalkeeper for the Kerala state to being a physician, director, and of course at the bottom you see his dog Tufi, which is also famous. Dr. Lily John, I'm so glad she's here today, is an affable lady, quick, efficient, and pragmatic. Dr. Lily John, I think, still may have a long white gown. She would not walk, she would run, and the whole unit would run behind her. She would always be the first to the ward with Dr. Alka. She emphasized the importance of clinical acumen, wholesome care to every patient, and also the importance of undergraduate education. Her administrative skills were known. She delegated, and when issues needed to be taken up to the higher administration, she would do so. Her interest in endocrinology came from Dr. T.S. Koshi, and when she had to move from medicine 2 to medicine 3, when a vacancy for the head became available, the diabetes clinic moved with her. She was known for endocrine research and the longitudinal follow-up of diabetic patients with kidney disease. And she encouraged Dr. Alka Ganesh and Dr. George John, though they did actually specializations which were different from her. Dr. A.M. Cherian was known for his high standard of patient care, academic sessions, and journal clubs. And every week, all postgraduates had to bring a journal article for the journal club. He was a strict disciplinarian, and even now, I think the medicine one has their grand rounds the day after the OPD day, and we had to make sure that all the investigations, including investigation results, invasive investigation results, were ready the next morning for the grand round. On the grand round, he would look for the salt packets next to the patient with hyponatremia, and if there were unconsumed salt packets, the registrar was accountable. But outside the ward, he had a mischievous smile and a gentle nature, and showed great respect for us when we became faculty. He co-founded with Dr. Kurian the clinical epidemiology unit and was the founder president of the India Clin. This was the beginning of the interest in clinical epidemiology and evidence-based medicine, and he started the faculty and postgraduate training in clinical epidemiology. The faculty in medicine too also went on to develop areas, Dr. Sheshadri in endocrinology, Dr. DJ Christopher, pulmonary medicine, and Dr. Debashish Danda of rheumatology. In medicine too formed the house in which several specializations developed. Dr. Sheshadri is known for his meticulous patient care of high quality, looking at his notes with his ink pen, which are carefully written, concise, and thorough. And for his bedside teaching, I remember in a postgraduate clinic in gastro ward, he picked up a KF ring which the gastroenterology had missed. And there was another patient who had a PUO where the medical student identified a radial artery aneurysm, and that he said this patient has a polyarthritis nodosa, and he got the student to present that case in the clinical meeting, always encouraging students on the importance of careful clinical examination. He said new ideas and innovations would be floated during the teaching sessions, including the journal clubs, the clinical meetings. And one such example is Odavantalai poisoning. And from those clinical discussions, he encouraged Dr. Satya to pursue her interest in the mechanisms of Odavantalai poisoning. He said the importance is to look after patients to our best of our ability with interdepartmental collaboration. He emphasized the importance of going to the lab and discussing, and he developed good collaboration to the clinical biochemistry and figuring out ways to provide cost-effective treatment. Give the example of a patient in his PG days who was coning with a tuberculous meningitis and hydrocephalus, and he got the neurosurgeon to operate with a sample VP shunt, and he said that this patient would otherwise have been refused treatment, but to figure cost-effective ways to provide good treatment to everyone is the essence of what is the Department of Medicine. He developed endocrinology within medicine, and his interest in endocrinology came from his UG and PG days. He was encouraged by Dr. T.S. Koshi. He went for further training, his PhD in Australia, and then worked closely with clinical biochemistry with small beginnings of one room, one chair, one table, and a few beds to develop endocrinology. And we know today endocrinology is a world-class department in CMC, and he has mentored Dr. Nihal Thomas and Dr. Simon Rajaratnam. We move to the third phase and the most recent, And the year of this photograph is probably somewhere between 2006 and 2008. All the front row have retired, and all the back two rows are no longer in medicine except for Tambu. Dr. Alka joined for an MD in CMC and then went on, actually left the course here to join in Delhi when Dr. Ganesh got his MS training in Delhi. And she finished her MD and then came back here. And when she came back to CMC, there was actually no place in the Department of Medicine. She joined radiology and she developed good radiological skills, including doing arteriograms. And her forte was good clinical medicine. She emphasized the importance of cost-effective medicine, rational prescribing. She would ensure that a fundoscopy was done before a lumbar puncture. She emphasized the importance of bedside teaching on grand rounds and seniors picking up findings which other people have missed. Her significant contribution in CMC has been to medical education. She was part of the first medical education unit in CMC, starting the teacher training based on her experience of training in Pondicherry. She went on to develop the clerkship, small group teaching at the bedside, communication skills training. She did a period in Malaysia of problem-based learning, and she brought that back to CMC. She worked with the clinic in the biochemistry department on integrated teaching. So she did several innovations in medical education, which have had national policy impact. And other main contribution was geriatric medicine. And she says that Dr. Chinoy Chako, former head of pathology, wrote her a letter saying that is there need for the specialty of geriatrics? This was after Dr. Chinoy had retired and gone back to Kerala. And that encouraged Dr. Alka to take up a senior training fellowship in UK and came back to start the geriatric clinic, the weekly clinic, set up a multidisciplinary team, and then encouraged Dr. Prasad and Dr. Sureka to train in geriatrics, and she was founder member of the Geriatric Society. Dr. Alka also had interests in primary and secondary care. She helped Dr. Vinod Shah develop modules for the family medicine course. She ran a clinic in the Karigiri Hospital. And when she reached 60, CMC asked her whether she would be the first head of family medicine to start the MD training program. So she holds many distinctions in CMC of developing several different areas in our institution. Dr. Kurian contributed significantly in different areas. He was head of the quality management cell, used to get patient feedback and contribute to the strengthening of quality of patient service. As the head of department, he recorded all the clinical meetings, made summaries, and those were sent to the mission hospitals. Though we had strong heads, they did not always work well together. But Dr. Kurian emphasized on working on collective decision-making and democratic functioning in the department. Along with Dr. A.M. Charan, he set up the clinical epidemiology unit and then went on to head it and strengthen it and to focus postgraduate thesis on important questions. He was a well-known researcher. He did the first community surveillance of HIV in the population to find out the size of the problem in India. His other major work was in the epidemiology of invasive pneumococcal disease serotypes and antimicrobial resistance. And this has had policy implication in the choice of serotypes for the vaccine. He went on to have policy impact in the development of the National Integrated Disease Surveillance Program and the National AIDS Control Program. Dr. Dilip has already been introduced, and we all know he's a much-loved teacher. He could make perpetual bunkers come to class. A student who came to the posted in medicine 1 would have to come in the evening and stay with them till he finished his OPD, and he would drive them back in his car. He would make learning fun. He would bet on diagnosis and made sure that he could give the dinner to the students when he lost the bet. He shared not only his knowledge, but his excitement of clinical medicine. He is still immaculately groomed, and he said, you have to learn how to carry yourself. He never raised his voice. He said that before you give a negative feedback, always say two good things. He constantly challenged his students to rise above the ordinary and do their best. And although he developed infectious disease in the last phase of his career, he chose to develop the department by setting up Medicine Unit 4 and moving to acute care medicine. And he kept his interest, the department's interest, ahead of his own. Both Dr. Kurian and Dr. Dilip led the expansion of postgraduate training with the DNB course and the expansion in seats in general medicine. Dr. George John was a remarkable clinician. I remember an internship in Medicine 3 on a Sunday round. So the patient admitted with the injection abscess. Dr. George John came to the bedside, looked at the neck, put a stent on the right side of the heart, said this patient has a tricuspid infective endocarditis. It was an impossible diagnosis, but he made it. He was so fast. So this patient had a CV wave on the JVP, a prominent V wave on the JVP. He had a tricuspid systolic murmur, and he just put everything together in 5 seconds and said this patient has an infective endocarditis. And he says that the difference between an outstanding teacher and a good one is the ability to convey enthusiasm and give insights in how symptoms and signs lead to a diagnosis, and to figure the signal from the noise. And also, he said he's learned much more from questions from his own students. Dr. George John was encouraged by Dr. Lily John, but there was no post of professor in Medicine 3, and he decided to do intensive care. It was a need in CMC at that time. He went on to do training in Australia and then came back. And I was a PG at that time. And I remember he did a 1-month lecture series in critical care in the night, every night. And with every class, he would give a detailed cyclostyle note. And that's how we all learned critical care medicine. And that was later put together what is today the textbook of critical care medicine, which goes across the country. He helped with Dr. Nagamani in surgical ICU. He developed the division of critical care medicine and postgraduate training in critical care medicine, including the ICU technician course, and mentored Dr. J.V. Peter, Dr. Kishore Pichimuthu, and Dr. Binila Chako. This is the inauguration in the current location of the medical ICU. This is the farewell of Dr. Dilip and Dr. Kurian Thomas, and the Diamond Jubilee celebration of MD training of the department. It was not all serious stuff, and this is at a staff entertainment where we see all our seniors there. I've told you many stories about the 12 seniors in the 75-year period. And from this, I want to extract the themes of core attributes of general medicine department. So based on these different interviews, I did a thematic analysis of the interviews. And on the right side is the number of frequency of the theme in the interviews. Dedicated teachers, bedside teaching, the art of medicine, social aspects and communication, patient-centered care, the model of PG training, quality patient care under the supervision of good teachers, mentoring, role modeling, clinical acumen and judgment, cost-effective clinical management, addressing emerging health concerns, commitment to holistic patient care, endurance, hard work and long hours, the importance of general physician training, interdepartmental collaboration and multidisciplinary teams, answering research questions, meticulous documentation, punctuality, discipline, and academic development of faculty. How did the seniors in medicine contribute to specialization? We see in italics the people who started different departments. In the case of gastroenterology, Dr. V.I. Martin, Dr. Selwyn Baker developed their interest in gastroenterology around tropical sprue. But Dr. Pullamode, though he had interest in gastroenterology, decided to stay on in Medicine Unit 1 and allow Dr. Martin and Dr. Selwyn Baker to separate and form the gastroenterology department. Dr. Pullamode looked after leukemia patients in Medicine 1, but he identified Dr. Marmon to develop this area, train in Australia, come back and set up the hematology department. Dr. Alka was the one who initiated the interest in geriatric medicine. But when the Medical Council of India said that we should start an MD training program, Dr. Prasad and Dr. Surekha were able to set up the geriatric department. Dr. Raju Chaku was identified to do clinical oncology. He joined Medicine Unit 2, treat oncology patients, round with RT department, and then went for further training and set up the medical oncology department. Dr. Debashish Danda had done clinical immunology training before he came here, came to Medicine to set up clinical services for autoimmune diseases, did further training in Australia, came back, and then the rheumatology department separated. Dr. Dilip Matai and Dr. O.C. Abraham both developed the infectious disease discipline. This enabled Dr. Priscilla Rupali and Dr. George M. Varghese to separate the Department of Infectious Disease, which branched off and is its own independent department. Each of these stories of the formation of different specializations have a different story. But what is common across all the stories is that in each case, there were senior professors provided a supportive environment for individuals to develop their interest area and provided freedom and autonomy. And they together chose an area or a clinical problem, found training opportunities, helped to build a team, and provided administrative support. In conclusion, the Department of Medicine has come a long way the last 75 years. While we are in the same place and in the same buildings, the practice and teaching of medicine are very different. From a time when medicine was the only specialty, we are among many specialties today. Our undergraduate and postgraduate courses are a route to further training rather than a destination. Each of our core attributes may be under challenge: clinical acumen, patient-centeredness, cost-effectiveness, bedside teaching. In the era of specialization, what is the role of the general physician and the Department of Medicine? A close examination of the legacy of our departments provides clear answers. All the 12 pioneers except 2 gave a lifetime of service till their superannuation to the department and to CMC. It is remarkable that each of them have contributed to the development of the department in unique and substantive ways. Their commitment, steadfastness, and dedication to high-quality patient-centered care and education is evident. Each of them developed an area within the department, specializing, identifying an area of interest, a need that needed to be fulfilled, training themselves, developing services, building teams, mentoring another generation of leaders, and initiating training programs. Specializing may have led to specialties which are very visible today in prominent departments such as Ranipet. Specializing may also have led to contributions such as medical education, clinical epidemiology, strengthening family medicine, supporting mission hospitals, answering critical research questions, policy changes at the national level, which have had wide-ranging impacts on health in the country. The tree of general medicine is not only what we see here today, which is the 5 units on top. It is the roots which are deep and the trunk which is wide and strong. It is the branches which have established their own trees. We need to nurture and conserve the trunk at the institution level and within the country. A strong general medicine department has to provide the basis for sound postgraduate training of general physicians. Anyone who undertakes post-subspecialty training should have a strong foundation in general medicine. We need training programs that can produce another generation of pioneers for our department. The general medicine department at CMC has the capacity to maintain our inner core attributes and at the same time develop new areas and disciplines to respond to the changing needs. In being able to maintain and match these two impulses within us, conserving the core of clinical medicine while specializing, we may be able to maintain our relevance in the current time and provide direction for the future.
Yeah. Dr. Anand has chronicled the growth and the milestones of the Department of Medicine over the last 75 years. I thought I was a furniture piece, but Anand has moved me to a museum piece. So I would like to state that there are 2 other pieces that whom I served under. I would now request Dr. Lily John and Dr. Alka Ganesh to say a few words about the Department of Medicine.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anand, for doing such a big job. It's not an easy one to think about 75 years of developing the medicine department into many specialities. You have done a big job. Thank you so much for it. We all enjoyed listening to all the old stories. I have actually added some more stories to it, but probably it is not the time. I think you missed out on P. Koshi, as I written in that when I was a house surgeon, 3 months under P. Koshi, it was much before the hemodialysis, but we had to look after a patient with renal failure. So he told us, we will do a peritoneal dialysis that night. And we, the junior house surgeons, he gave us the ingredients for the dialysing fluid. We sat down and made up the fluid ourselves. And in the night, he did the dialysis. And it was sort of successful. But he stayed the whole night in a stretcher in one of the places I remember very well. That is how he was. I think one name he's not a staff, Dr. Narilwala. I can mention. See, during my postgraduate MD, I had only 2-year postgraduation, of which 1 year was general medicine, 6 months of cardiology, and 6 months of neurology. And that medicine 1 year is under one person. And I had to work under a person called Dr. Narilwala. He was a terrific teacher, of course. Everyone liked him, the way he talks and presents everything. But only thing is that he will call you at midnight for rounds. And, I sort of agreed, and I used to go and there was an intern called Shantan, what's that name? We will go, he will bring a patient from the ward, we'll do a barium studies in the middle of the night, but that is how medicine department in those days worked hard. We had no special laboratory except for the basic, no ultrasound, no scans or anything else. Everything by clinical. So even liver abscess will aspirate by clinical, acumen, put in the needle with the maximum tenderness, and we draw the pus out. And many other investigations, like in my post graduation, you never heard of probably pneumoencephalogram for the brain and bilateral carotid angiogram, of course. And there's a thing called presacral insufflation for abdominal tumors. You inject air through the thing. And, things like that we had to depend on in addition to minimum laboratory test, but nothing more than that. But, we all developed our clinical acumen so much in those days. And I've also written that in the beginning, that I always prefer general medicine to be thoroughly put into one before you specialize into subspecialties. And that is what has happened here. Because of that, the subspecialty also has grown so well, because general medicine is the root of everything, the basis of everything. If you have a good general medical knowledge, everything works out much easier than others. That is my advice, that there are many people who branch out soon after the MD, but nowadays just getting an MD does not make you a good clinician, but you have to work hard for it. I'm so grateful to be an alumni of this. And I have also written in my conclusion that only when you leave this place, you realize the significance or the amount of knowledge you gained in this place. You will never get it anywhere else. We have such the wholesome caring, as you have mentioned, which you learn here, and that keeps you wherever you go in the world, that we can be successful in our clinical practice, because our aim is to treat the patient and not to make them suffer. So we know how to do that. And I'm so privileged to be a part of this alumni. And I can say that the training of medicine in whichever field it is, it's so great that people should appreciate it. Only when you leave, you'll realize it. While you are here, you may not realize that much, but it's a good thing to know that how grateful and how great we are. We are all thankful to Ira Scudder, who started the institution with to be ministered unto and not to minister the theme, that we look after the patient with all the care and all the love which we can give. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dilip, for asking not only the ancient people museum pieces, but the prehistoric people also to come. And I'm so glad that Dr. Lily John preceded me. She's a good 10 years older. And I think during the time when I worked with her, I got many of her characteristics. And one day I found myself even signing like her. That's how important you are. And I would like to acknowledge a very great mentor here, Dr. Zachariah, father of Anand, and he has been a driving force, at least in my field when I came into family medicine, and I thought I should mention you, sir. Thank you. And to Anand, Anand in his meticulous style asked us, gave just one email about what he wanted to do. I went to my computer and wrote 10 pages. And later when I tried to send it to Surekha, I found that it was garbled, there were spelling mistakes, but my enthusiasm to write down all my experiences, which nobody had asked me before. And when we try to tell about our experiences, the younger people do rolling of the eyes and say, oh my God, because I always, when I taught afterwards, after going from here, the DNB students, I used to start off by saying, do you know that in the pre-ultrasound era, we did these tests called shifting dullness, and we had long clinical discussions, and we did splenectomy while we were doing the rounds in different positions. So that was clinical medicine. So, and Dr. Lily has very nicely said how we did so many things which were cutting edge those days. And I want to just go back away from there and thank all of you in the Department of Medicine for having this wonderful heritage series. Why is it important, you might wonder? History always teaches us something. One, of course, is not to make the same mistakes, but it also tells us where we came from. Without knowing that, we will think today that we are very great people, and the arrogance actually lifts us to places which are not good. So, the history of how things started, even before us, tells us and informs us about the present. And this then helps to direct us about the future. And today we stand at the crossroads of medicine. From what you have heard today of clinical medicine at its most basic, at a brilliant level, we now stand at a crossroads of artificial intelligence. And I want to challenge you youngsters here. How are you going to face artificial intelligence? I have been teaching physician assistants for the last 3 years. They are a dejected lot because they did poorly in the NEET examinations. And I had to tell them that they were probably the budding doctors of the future, because we now may not need such highly trained pullavars like all of us. We might just need people who had a basic knowledge, who will have to feed into artificial intelligence and yet maintain that human touch, because no amount of AI can ever replace the human touch. But I think we all have to reorient ourselves into this massive, fantastic input that is going to be AI. But unless we prepare ourselves, we should not become the servants of AI. They should not take us over. We must always direct, because where is tender loving care going to come from? Where is cost effectiveness going to come? Maybe they say you can teach all this to the computer. The AI will even read our thoughts and our misery. I doubt it. And so I would like to end, because I know time is short, but many of us, if you make the mistake of giving us a chance to stand at the podium, we may go on and on and on. But I know Dilip, he might call in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, which are his favorite things. And I want to say a word about Dilip. Dilip was the spark that kept us dowdy old people running around, because he always had a new idea. He always had new ways of doing things. So thank you, Dilip, very much for allowing us to speak.
Yeah, it's 9:11 and we have to close. But we need to bridge the gap. Can I ask one of the PG year 1, 2, or 3 to see if you are comfortable with what your predecessors did and whether you have any new ideas? Okay, anyone, PGY 1, 2, or 3? I see the table chairs folding up. Nobody. And I don't want any young faculty to speak. Come on, there must be some PGY 1, 2, and 3. Come up. Yeah. There's no political thought in this. Yeah. Okay. Any lady? Anyone? Come. No, you don't have to sound very articulate or anything, No, nothing erudite. Are we on the right track? Are they setting you up in good stand instead for the future? Do you have any suggestions? Yes. Thank you so much. That's a brave young lady.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, sir. I am Esther Inbarani. I am assistant professor in Medicine 4. I just want to share a few names here. I always, when I think of my recent past, I think of few S's in my life. So Dr. Soumya, Dr. Sudha, Dr. Samuel, and Dr. Tammu David Sudarsam. So they all shaped me as I went through my PG days. And actually, to speak, I was an intern in Medicine 4. So Dr. O.C. and Dr. Samuel George used to take the rounds. And the only thing that I remember which inspired me to take general medicine was at the end of the talking to the patient, they came up with the diagnosis. So the history was so sharp and to the point that the diagnosis was made at the end of history taking. So that is what has brought me where I am today. And I'm grateful to the Department of Medicine. Thank you so much to all the people who made it possible.
Thank you. That was a very heartfelt thought. And I think it's time. I've been given time only up to 9:11. I hand it over to the Department of Medicine to conclude the session. Abhi, you.
So thank you, the department, and for all the speakers and all the invited people who have come today. As a tradition, we always request the department to have a final group photograph before you leave. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.